So a lack of trust and faith in God is an unfortunate part of our human nature. And it applies to everything. We need to trust, actively trust. That means emulate, follow, obey, and have faith in God in everything that we do. We were talking about finances. That's just one part. And that's a big one. People leave churches because clergy talks about tithing a lot sometimes. Well, you know why? Because you can't have a place without it, right? There were temple taxes. There were tithing and sacrifices to the Levites to keep things going. And we have to do that. That's the best remedy for poverty that I know. I've learned it. I've been through it. You know? All right. So it's a part of us, and it can be overcome with God's help, which He already provided through His Torah. It's all there. All the instructions are there. Now, the leaders of the tribes chosen to reconnoiter the land which God was about to give them focused on the obvious. They focused on the human physical reality, if you will, again, which is not reality. And that's why I have the little globe up here with the tornado and Dorothy going through it and all that. God's out here. Our reality's inside the glass ball there, okay? Instead of focusing on God's ability to overcome any physical obstacle put in the path of His plan for His people. That's why we don't need, and I see the anxiety growing again with midterm elections and all these other things. We need not be concerned about the outcome. We are not pawns. I don't care what people say. We are not pawns by any shape or form. We are not. God is in control. He allows us to move here and there and everywhere, do things, go through things, all these things according to His plan. So leaders, corrupt or not, are allowed to be as part of God's plan. Now, God would have definitely loved us, all humanity, to love Him. Eventually, we'll see this coming together. But for now, we don't. And because of our continued rebellion against God's Torah, even when we know what it is, has resulted in what we're dealing with now. You play, you pay. And that's what we're about to do. And this is incredible in light of the fact that God had so recently, in the case of our Parashah, brought the people out from under Egyptian bondage through the Sea of Reeds, miraculously parting at just the right time, just long enough for the Israelites' safe passage. So the narrative of the 10 spies highlights the deleterious spiritual and physical effects on societies and nations that mistrust and a lack of faith in God of even a few people can cause. A few people can bring down a nation. Right? The only two men who overcame what was an instinctive human response demonstrated by the 10 spies was Yehoshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Yefunni, who had, quote, a different spirit, and that verse has a capital S, with him and fully followed me. Talking about God, talking about him. So all the people of Israel disregarded their encouragement of Yehoshua and Caleb. Right? They blew it off because they were overtaken by human emotion, human fear. Right? And they rebelled. They were afraid of physical obstacles reported by the other spies, the people. They rebelled. They went with the fear factor. Okay? So speaking against God and His chosen leaders is a serious matter. And we're going to go more into that next week. I'm really looking forward to next week's message with you because I'm bringing how our response to AI correlates to Moshe's response to Korach. All right? And that's going to be, it's really cool. I had a lot of fun writing that one. So in chapter 14, 36 through 8, we become acutely aware of just how important it is that we as true believers live and speak in confidence in our God, even when human logic defies it. Even when you see the storm coming. It's developing that trust and that faith that I may lose my house, I may lose my life. But I'm not going to lose anything that I need to worry about. If I lose my house, God's got plan B. If I lose my life, my soul will be with Him. And so you see, it's a win-win. We just don't see it that way at the time because it's devastating to lose a house. It's devastating to lose a loved one, all right, or anything else. So when human logic tempts us to give into an action or response that's contrary to God's Torah, spiritually or physically, we read, the men whom Moshe had sent to reconnoiter the land, and who, when they returned, made the entire community complain against him by giving an unfavorable report about the land, those men who gave the unfavorable report about the land died by the plague in the presence of Adonai. Of the men who went to reconnoiter the land, only Yehoshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Yefuneh, remained alive. Just like Nadav and Abihu. Are we not surrounded by God's mercy for not taking us out already? I know that we've all done sins that would merit such a thing, and yet he lets us live to correct ourselves, to grow, to obey him more as we learn more of his Torah. So as maturing believers, we must start our walk by trusting that Yahweh Yeshua is who he says he is, and continue to open our hearts and minds to his Torah, sort of like a butterfly slowly emerging from its chrysalis and spreading its wings to their fullest capacity. And I put that in there because one day, we've got a lot of monarch butterflies because we have milkweed, which is their host plant, right? And I watched this one open up this chrysalis, and I thought, oh, it's going to hop out and fly away. Not so. It took hours for that thing to emerge, and then it sat there in the grass with all the bluebirds and everything else around it, totally vulnerable while its wings dried, you know? And then it flew off. Fortunately, it made it. How many don't? All right? Think about yourself. You're emerging from apostate religion, all right? And it takes hours for the butterfly, but years, maybe even a lifetime for us, all right? And we're totally vulnerable to Hasatan as we start to dry out and spread our wings with the knowledge of God's Torah. Same idea. This process takes really a lifetime. Our level of trust in our God should continue to expand as God leads us through these obstacles and testings in our lives, that we may continue to grow on the vine and produce good fruit. And I thought about this one because we're having such a good time with the garden. I mean, it's so cool to watch, you know, itty bitty seed, and what does it do? As soon as it breaks the surface, it spreads out leaves toward the sun. Should we not do the same thing? Spread our hearts and our souls toward the sun. S-O-N. Okay. Yehoshua and Caleb knew that we can accomplish nothing without God, but that anything is possible with God. And that's in the book of Matthew. So even after the incident of the 10 spies, the Israelites decided they could regain God's favor by going to the place Adonai promised, even though God had not ordered them to do so. Remember that as a kid? Doing some bad things? Well, you know, I know what mom and dad like. I'm going to go do this for them. I'll buy them a present, or I'll do this or that. I'll empty the trash on time, you know. And it didn't work. You know, they saw through it, just like Moshe did with Korach next week. Taking their destiny into their own hands, in effect, worshiping God their way instead of God's way. Think about all these charismatic churches who have added all kinds of entertainment, and they give the leader of that the title of worship leader or worship minister because it sounds good. And then you see, instead of just services or teaching services, you see worship services, and it all focuses around making you feel good. What a shallow emotional experience. Think about what you're going there for. It shouldn't be for that shallow emotional experience. It should be to learn God's Torah. God means what he says. And yet the Israelites chose to go to the high parts of the hill country, even though the Ark of the Covenant of Adonai remained in the camp. You can't leave God behind. The enemies of God, the Amalekim and the Canaanim, descended from the hill country. They struck the Israelites down and beat them back all the way to Hormah. Reflecting back on the narrative of Nadav and Abihu, as I said, who were immediately killed for presenting unauthorized fire before Adonai, we should realize that God's commands are just that. They are what they are. Daddy, why do I got to do this? Because I said so. Well, you did it. At the time you did it because you were probably smaller than your mom or dad, and they looked kind of intimidating. If we could actually see God, I don't know about you, but I'd be down on the ground with my face to the ground in humble adoration and a humble fear. God never changes, and the fact that He is the Word by default never changes. So we can't pick and choose. Well, I can't do this because of that, or I can't eat this because of that, you know? It is what it is. So after reading our narrative, we should ask ourselves why Yehoshua and Caleb were singled out as the only two who possessed such faith and trust in Adonai, when the majority of the spies and the people succumbed to human nature to believe what they physically saw and not consider the power of God, even though they had all experienced it. So Moshe renamed Hoshea, the son of Nun, before Hosea went out with the others to reconnoiter the land. And his new name was Yehoshua. And we can only understand the significance of these names in Hebrew. That's why I say, learn some of the Hebrew. You don't have to know how to speak it. You'll learn that when we get there. We'll be able to speak God's language, all right? But for now, understand, look up these names and find out what they mean, because you're going to get a whole lot of information you'll never get by reading the NIV or the NAS or the whatever Bible you read. And that's why I say, don't just say, hey, whatever Bible you read is fine, because it's not. Many of them are very misleading. The root of Yasha means salvation, and the root Yaho referring to God. Yeshua, okay? God saves. With the Hebrew name change, the spelling is also different, which gives the new name a much more significant meaning. Joshua in Hebrew means God is salvation. Yeshua, it's contractive. This is because of the addition of the Yud. If you see this in Exodus 3:14, you'll understand. So it seems that Moshe was given insight to know that Yehoshua knew from where his strength and salvation would come. This narrative teaches us that we must learn to look beyond what is seen with physical sight and know that we can safely entrust our lives to God in all situations. Because, you know, now we've got AI. It is so deceptive. Unless you're really looking, and in some cases you can't tell anything that's different. Sometimes now you can kind of tell with the way a face, the symmetry or the eyes or something doesn't look quite right. But it's getting there to where you're not going to be able to tell the difference. And as I said, people are starting to totally disregard AI or totally believe in it instead of using the capacity God gave us in our brains to critically analyze, like Moshe did with Korach. The name change was also a blessing to Yehoshua because he would have known the meaning of his new name. Now, that there were only 2 of 12 who trusted God, even though the physical obstacles would have been insurmountable for the people had God not been so involved, shows us that not everyone who calls themselves believers will make it into the kingdom of heaven. That first generation did not make it. It was a provisional forgiveness. And God told Moshe that. So for parallel scriptures, I'm going to give them here because this is being recorded. Matthew 7:21, Romans 9:27, Isaiah 10:22, Leviticus 23, and Luke 13:24. Now, keeping with the consistency of God's Torah, comparing the fact that only Yehoshua and Caleb embodied trust over fear when facing a seemingly impossible situation, and the fact that concerning Israel, Isaiah, the prophet, cried out, "Though the people of Israel are as numerous as the sand of the seashore, only a remnant will be saved." And they're not talking about biological Jews here. That's where people also get all kinds of confused. Romans 9:27, we're given more evidence of the Jew-Gentile connection and God's consistent standards or regulations for anybody who wants to be considered one of God's people. This is also in Romans chapters 9 through 16. Those who argue that God's Torah states all Israel will be saved in Romans 11:26, it does say that. But again, they do not understand the context of that word Israel in that particular instance. So we've got to learn to understand what is Israel, biological Israelites, and what is Israel, all true believers, Jew and Gentile, when it says that. So all Israel, all true believers will be saved. But not everybody who says, I'm a believer, is going to be saved. What they've been taught erroneously is the gospel of profession. I believe Jesus, I love you, and I'm saved. Wing. That is not the way it works. There is nothing in the Torah that supports that. So, believers, true believers, again, I refer to these scriptures defined in the sevenfold witness in the book of Revelation, John chapter 14, and Romans 1 through 3. You see who a true Jew is, who a true believer is. Yeshua makes it very clear. Now, there's an additional significant point in connection with Yehoshua and Caleb. Caleb represents the tribe of Judah, and Hosea, or Yehoshua, represented Ephraim. Although Hosea, which literally means help, was the name on the official register, Joshua from Yehoshua, Yahovah, Yahweh, help, was the name Moshe bestowed upon him. So it's amazing that this far back in the history of mankind, and Israel specifically, we see Judah and Ephraim working in tandem. And the book of Ezekiel pulls it all together. Judah, Israel, Ephraim, Israel, becoming one stick in God's hand. This is Ephraim representing the 10 lost tribes of Israel, and Judah representing the southern tribes, Levi, Benjamin, and Judah. There was part of Simeon in there somewhere too. So for more on the subject of the connection between Ephraim and Judah, as I said, the two sticks becoming one in God's hand is in Ezekiel chapter 37, 15 through 28. And you can see what this is. And it also says fellow travelers. Okay? Now, backing off a bit, defocusing our thoughts for a moment from the immediate situation involving a possible assault, depending on the reconnaissance report, we can hopefully see how God used the situation as a terminal test of faith. He knew that from a human standpoint, the report would be overwhelmingly negative. The Anakim were living there. Amalek lived in the area of the Negev. The spies saw the Nephilim, hybrid descendants of the fallen angels, who were giants compared to the average-sized man. God orchestrated this ultimate test of faith before the spies and the nation Israel. Would their fears dissipate, considering Yehoshua and Caleb's strong admonition and encouragement not to fear the people living in the land, even though they were the Nephilim? So again, it's human nature to fear the unknown. Nobody likes that, all right? The situations whereby victory seems impossible. But God has shown us through His Torah that victory in the spiritual context, and sometimes even the physical, under any circumstances, can be ours if we put our trust in Him, just as David did when faced with what seemed like certain death. And I've talked about this narrative before. Recall that Goliath was also a descendant of the Nephilim. All right? Fallen angels, also identified as a Philistine. You follow that historic line and look at Nephilim, Philistine, Palestinian, on and on, okay? So exactly how tall Goliath was depends on where we obtain our information. I'll give you the information and tell you how unimportant it really was. The Masoretic text, written in Hebrew, indicates that he was 6 cubits and a span, and that would be about 9.5 feet tall. Pretty intimidating. The Septuagint, which is the ancient Greek translation of the Old Testament, has Goliath's height at 4 cubits and a span, which is about 6.5 feet tall. The Hebrew text found in the Dead Sea Scrolls indicates Goliath was 4 cubits tall, about 6 feet tall. Not so intimidating, but if you're a little shepherd boy or a shepherd guy like David, anything above you looks tall. I'm constantly on Joe about the way he puts things away to where I cannot reach them. I am altitude challenged. I truly am. So I try to get the salt shaker and I'm standing like this, try to get the syrup and I'm reaching back like this. And even in our little trailer, I can't reach the air conditioner. So I got to give him a little step stool and put it in the air conditioner and reach up and do it if Joe's not available. So I know how intimidating a difference in height can be when you're on the low end of the totem pole. But regardless of whichever is correct, and this is why I say not important, Goliath was physically taller and stronger than David, and there were no other takers when it came to who might go up against him. So remember that the Israelites failed to wipe out the Amalekites, a subset of the Nephilim, in their conquest of the Promised Land. As a result, the Anakites survived in Gath and its surrounding cities, eventually becoming Philistines. The details about David and Goliath are discussed in this lesson to call our attention to the enormity of what the 10 spies must have seen. Before we judge them and say, they're a bunch of whatevers, put somebody like that in front of you and a whole bunch of people like that, big people, in front of you and see what you think. The reason I say it's not important is because Caleb and Yehoshua had that faith that rose above fear. Faith above fear is what they had. And so they recognized that these people were bigger and very intimidating, but they realized that he is bigger. Don't mess with my dad, okay? The fact that we can fall from God's grace and lose our position as believers on the way to salvation is reflected in the narrative found in Numbers 10, 14 through 24. This can happen. We are not once saved, always saved. Ever. The sad result of the people's rebellion is that God can and does provide provisional forgiveness that does not equate to salvation. Christians don't like to hear that at all. At all. But it's the truth. It's in God's Torah. I'm just the messenger. Right? The sages identify the 10 times the Israelites tested God as the following. And it comes out of a book called Sayings of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot. Okay? The first one, at the sea. Number 2, at Marah. Number 3, without food. Number 4, gathering manna. Remember, don't gather manna on Shabbat. And they did anyway. At Rephidim, manna on Shabbat was number 5. At Rephidim, the golden calf. Murmuring, manna not tasty. The Torah says, what does the Torah say? It tastes like coriander seed, right? That's what the Torah says. But what do the sages say? It tasted like Willy Wonka. Whatever you want it to taste like is what it tastes like. This is blueberry, and I taste the roast beef, and no. I don't know what coriander seed tastes like. Cilantro. Cilantro, I'm sorry. Yeah, cilantro.
Coriander seed comes from cilantro.
Oh, okay, same thing. What does it taste like, do you know?
It's very similar, it's a little bit like...
Is it sweet? No.
Soapy.
It's what?
It can be soapy.
It can be soapy?
Yeah, some people say it tastes soapy, but...
Well, that would be interesting why God would make it taste like soapy. Maybe he's cleaning their mouth out after their rebellion.
You're cleaning them out.
Yeah. I don't know. But you see how far we can get away from God's Torah by surmising, by guessing, and filling in the blanks, all right? So the 10th one was believing the spies' evil report against the land. That's no trust. So we see exactly what God says about this limited forgiveness. In Numbers 20:24, and I put this in here to show anyone who's listening or reading this, that what I'm saying is true. Adonai answered, I have forgiven as you ask. But as sure as I live, and that the whole earth is filled with the glory of Adonai, none of the people who saw my glory and the signs I did in Egypt and in the desert, yet tested me these 10 times and did not listen to my voice, i.e. following his commands, all right, will see the land I swore to their ancestors. None of those who treated me with contempt will see it. But my servant Caleb, because he had a different spirit, capital S, with him and has fully followed me, him I will bring into the land he entered, and it will belong to his descendants. So note the word spirit, as I said, is capitalized. God knew Caleb had the Spirit of God in him, and he was blessed. All right? Salvation is not a given. It's not granted for those who profess the Lord, yet continue to rebel against his laws, his instructions, including traditions of men, man-made laws, celebrating pagan holidays, celebrating Shabbat on Sunday rather than God's Shabbat, eating forbidden foods, and not keeping God's festivals, his designated times. And I put in the written transcript, see God's wrath yet to come for those who choose to rebel against God and his instructions in Romans 1:18 through 32. It's very clear. And adding to or subtracting from is in the book of Revelation. So they cannot claim Old Testament dead, no what, it's in the last, as a matter of fact, it's on the last page, all right, of the Torah, God's Torah. By the way, the Bible defines sin very clearly in 1 John 3:4, so that's not subjective either, all right? Sin is the transgression of the law, Torah. Torah translates as instructions / law. So I submit to you that anybody who doesn't believe this is calling God a liar. He tells us what sin is. All right? The only way one can attempt to ignore this scripture is to say that the law was nailed to the cross. And this statement and belief is more than erroneous, and it's not supported in God's Torah. It jeopardizes the final disposition of one's soul. That's crucial. You know, it was one thing for me to treat patients for physical maladies, and we brought in the spiritual aspects because spiritual aspects affect your physicality as well. But it's so much more important in a clergy type position to really get it right. You know, we call it practicing medicine in that realm because we don't have all the answers. But God gives us the answers that are crucial to our salvation in His Word. We don't have to guess. We don't have to fill in the blanks. All right? These are so important. Here's some more scriptures for you. Revelation 22, 18 and 19. Deuteronomy 4, verse 2. Deuteronomy 12, verse 32. Proverbs 30, verses 5 and 6. Galatians 1, 6 through 9, 2. And 2 Timothy 3, 16 and 17. All right? All right. So our Haftarah. This reflects back and forth. It all fits together very nicely. And this Haftarah reflects on the narrative of the spies sent by Yehoshua to scout out Jericho prior to the invasion of the Holy Land by the Israelites. And this event is similar to the one in our Parashah. Joshua sent 2 spies to Jericho, where they stayed at an inn within the city walls run by Rahab. The king discovered their presence, and he sent for Rahab and asked her to report the 2 men. Well, she covered for the men by telling the king that they had already left. She hid them on her rooftop and told the men that the people in the city were afraid of the Israelites' impending attack because they knew God was with them. She told them she knew God was going to give them the land, and she asked to be remembered and spared with her family when the Israelites attacked. She was told to tie a scarlet thread and hang it from her window, that this would be a symbol that her home was safe, a safe haven. So she helped them in escape via a rope out her window, and she told them how to hide if needed. The spies returned, and Rahab and her family were spared. Now we can see the similarity of the red thread in the window and the blood on the lintels of the doors during Pesach. Rahab was obedient, as were the Israelites. Her home was symbolically covered by the blood of Messiah that was yet to physically appear, but was already present. Finally, our Brit Hadashah is out of Hebrews 3. And this passage gives confirmation through the Brit Hadashah, the refreshed, renewed covenant, of what God said and did in this Parashah. There's little need for detailed explanation beyond the literal word. There is a point of no return. Just like the ark door. It's easy to understand when you look at the ark, the whole system. All right? He begged the people to come in, come in, come in, come in. And yet they mocked him. They made fun of him. They ignored him. Just like society is doing today. And when that door shut, things changed. And the door will shut again, just as on the parable of the virgins, the 10 virgins. Okay? The Ruach confirms this fact. Quote, "Watch out, brothers, so that there will not be in any one of you an evil heart lacking trust, which could lead you to apostatize," which means fall away, "from the living God. Instead, keep exhorting each other every day, as long as it is called today, so that none of you will become hardened by the deceit of sin. For we've become sharers in the Messiah, provided, however, that we hold firmly to the conviction we began with, right through until the goal is reached." That's in Hebrews 3:12 through 14. And then John 14:12 reads, "Yes, indeed, I tell you that whosoever trusts in me," there's that word, "will also do the works I do." It is an active verb, trusting, doing the acts that he does, do the works that he has assigned us. John 14:15, "If you love me, you will keep my commands." All of them, to the best of your ability. There's some we can't because we don't have a temple. But I'm talking about, you know, the basic commands. We've got to follow them. And if we're not, we better get our act together. Because even if we make it, that's a crown that we won't be given, that we could have put at his feet. How important is he? How important is he to us? John 15:9, Yeshua tells us, "If you keep my commands, you will stay in my love." John 14:21, whoever has my commands and keeps them is the one who loves me. And the one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and reveal myself to him. John 14:24, someone who doesn't love me doesn't keep my words. What does that say? Every time we commit Lashon Hara, what does that say about our love for our God? What does it say? Think about those things. If you're short in an area on the, just even start with the 10. Think about it. Moving to Hebrews 3:18 and 19. And to whom was it that he swore that they would not enter his rest? Those who were disobedient. I'm telling you guys, you know, we've got to get our act together and put our mistrust or lack of trust aside. Trust him. So we see that these people were unable to enter because of a lack of trust. Not following God's commands is a lack of trust. To define the concept of trust and validate the term as an action verb, Hebrews chapter 11 will give you 18 examples. And I encourage you to read them and contemplate them. 18 examples. And 18 is a good number in Hebrew, by the way.